Well, it feels kind of weird shooting in this spot. This is our new Minnesota whiteboard, I guess, on the outside of our new home. And it seems like a cool spot. I like shooting this outside. I don't know how this is going to work in January when it's -10, but for right now, it's really cool to be out here. You know, finally, I'll quit talking about Minnesota, but we're excited. And part of that is that I'm looking at, you know, what to plant on the property, what we've already planted, what I'm going to plant in August, and really what you plant in your food plots. And having food plots to begin with, if you have private land, don't have food plots, you're missing the boat. I'm just going to tell you that right up front. And it's not even about hunting over the food plots. I think 22 out of my top 25 bucks have not been shot on food plots, 21, 22, somewhere around there. So I love food plots. I've had them since mid-90s. 95 is the first time I planted a food plot. I have a food plot book out there, and food plots are critical. If you don't have them, you lack the ability by just a fraction of your potential to actually mold a herd, shape a herd, and have a great hunt. If you have private land, you can't rely on the neighbor's ag land. We have ag land all around us, 3 sides basically around this parcel, and the food plots are critical in this location, and the ag land helps add a nighttime complement, but I want them feeding on the ag land after dark, during the dark hours, and feeding on my property, on my food plots during the daylight, and that's what you can do. It doesn't matter if you're in a big wooded wilderness setting, if you're surrounded by public land, like I had in the UP. My food plots drove and built the deer herd up there, and without food plots, there's cover everywhere, there's medium to low quality browse everywhere. You have to have food plots. But what do you plant? And I came up with a food plot pyramid. I talk to my clients about this all the time. I've talked about it on previous videos, but I want to dive into detail of what you need to plant and why. What should your base be based on your equipment? And I think it's very critical to understand these 3 steps, especially as I start getting questions. Why are you planting corn? Well, I'll tell you why I'm planting corn in a second, because that's the second step. The first, annual greens, critical. That's your base. That's the base of all food plot programs. Should be annual greens. If you do not have your annual greens covered, then you shouldn't go to step 2 or step 3. This is the first step right here. Along with this step, this is what someone could cover no matter what their food plot planting resources. You can always get greens. And I say annual greens because annual greens, especially if you're in this level and you can't plant level 2 or 3, annual greens will give you the most bang for your buck. You get more volume. They grow a lot more volume in a short period of time. And there's a lot of reasons to plant these in August in your area, whether it's early August, end of July in northern settings, or if you get down to Kentucky, West Virginia, southern Ohio, Illinois, Indiana. If you get it down Tennessee, some of those states, you might want to slant this more towards mid-August or late August. But bottom line is you're planting August greens because you get the most oomph, you get the most volume. And who cares if you don't have any food during the summertime? Because the deer are taken care of in your areas. I get sick of people saying online, you have to plant perennials, you have to plant greens during the summer for the fawns and the antlers. It sounds really good, but it's actually not true. On paper, it sounds good. We're taking care of the fawns, we're helping antlers grow, but there's more food than the deer need in your area unless you might be in the arid portions of Texas or Oklahoma, something like that. But even then, if you're in an ag area, if you're in a heavily wooded area, the deer have enough. And that's not coming from me. That's talking in conversations in the past with John Azoga, famed deer research biologist. I can always remember his head, the deer have 5 times more food than they need during the summertime. In even the UP and Michigan, in an arid area basically of winter food. And so yes, deer need food during the summertime to grow on, but at the same time, they already have it. So it's critical during the growing periods. People say, well, it's a critical time of need of food. Well, obviously, but the deer already have it. So when they're starving during the wintertime, like in some of the northern areas, when they're dying of winter severity, it's because they lack quality food. If they have quality food, they can withstand the winter severity that's in those northern areas. 225 inches in Shingleton area of Michigan. Mellstrand area of Michigan, 295 inches. Houghton area, 300 plus inches of snow. The deer live when they have quality browse and quality food during that time of year, and they die irregardless of what they have during the summer. So when you hit these fall annual greens, you can offer diversity. I'm talking on a list of peas, oats, late planted beans, and late planted peas, of course. Anything in the brassica family, which includes rape, turnip, and radish, rye, wheat, those can all give you the power that you need. And if you're in a southern area, if you're in Georgia, if you're in Alabama, think whatever green will work in your area that you can grow appreciably and have good volume and depend on. So during the summer, doesn't really matter. At the same time, in most areas, when you're putting a lot of food out during the summer, you're creating a doe factory. That's a real problem, and anybody that says different just doesn't understand deer and deer hunting and deer management. If you actually live in the whitetail world every year like I do, all summer long, you visit 100 plus clients a year, 1,000 clients in 26 states. When you see this all the time, you see things like a doe factory that rears its ugly head. And I think people go against concepts like that because they didn't come up with them. And they couldn't come up with them because they couldn't recognize or understand them. And so that's part of the problem with anything you see online is look at the experience level of the person behind it. I'm not selling anything that has to do with a doe factory. I'm not making any money from that. In fact, a lot of things I teach, for example, no scent on mock scrapes. I lose thousands of dollars a year because I don't take a sponsorship from a scent company because I don't believe it, and I've experienced to know otherwise. Greens, basic. It's a basic. If you have that food plot base on your property, then you can have the diversity with a lot of different plantings. And I like planting brassica on one side, so I have big volume. I might even plant peas and beans within that brassica, so I have their plot sweeteners to make sure the deer eat it. On the other side, I might have beans, peas, oats, rye, combinations of each one. You always plant your rye and wheat about 4 to 5 weeks separate from when you plant your brassicas. They do not go, if you see them in the same bag, run like the wind, because that is not a good combination. They fight each other. It's just someone trying to sell you something. Ryegrass, terrible thing to plant at this time of year, even though it'll look green and you can pat yourself on the back, but the deer don't like it. Very low preference anyways. And if they are eating, it's because they're probably starving in your area. The second level, corn. It's interesting. These greens, someone with a backpack sprayer and a handheld spreader can plant greens. And I talk about it in my no-till where you're spraying in early May, mid-June, end of July, and you're getting that in the ground. You can do so with very, very little equipment, very little money to get that in. Even if it's a bigger field, you just spend more walk time in spraying and seeding. Not a lot of equipment. Corn, you need more equipment, obviously. You need a corn planter, even a small tractor to pull a corn planter. Call a friend, call a neighbor. Maybe a local farmer can plant your corn for you. Maybe you have the expensive equipment to plant corn, but you make sure you have that base first and then corn, and that's what I'm doing this year. I have room for about 8 to 9 acres of green food plots, and then we added about 3.5 to 4 acres, 3 3/4 acre of corn. Now, if you're adding corn, if you only have room for 3 acres of plots, you don't want to put 2 acres of corn because you're probably not going to have enough green base in that 1 acre to supply that green base. So you have to make sure you have enough green base to get you through the season, the entire season, and then you add the corn on top of that. Some people have room for 6 acres of plots and they don't have an appreciable deer herd. Well, 3 acres of corn and 3 acres of green would probably be about right. We find that on the 40 acres that I work on around here in mid-ag, I can get away with 2 acres of greens, 2 1/4 acres, and that'll last me through the entire season, partly because I'm making sure it's weed-free, I'm making sure I'm hitting it with the right nutrients it needs, and I'm making sure that I'm not holding a summer doe factory that hammers it in August and depreciates the total volume that I can take into the hunting season. But that's an ag area. That's where deer can feed in those 5 times in a 24-hour period. They're partly feeding at night somewhere else. So it's taking pressure off those food plots. So that's how I can make them last longer too. So it's greens, 2 acres per 40, somewhere around there, but not per 40 acres. When you get up to 200 acres, that might mean you need 8 or 9 acres of green. We have 178 acres here, and that 8 or 9 acres of green is going to fill the bill. So that corn takes a lot more equipment to put in, but make sure you always have your green base first, and then you can add that corn. That corn in the entire north half of the country can be just a bountiful food plot for you because it really hammers home the November, December time frame and into January, and that's when you can build a herd. Again, you don't build a herd in May, June, July, August. In fact, you really rarely help the herd during that time of year, except in extreme circumstances. The lowest hole in the bucket is during the fall and winter again. And deer die at that time, they don't die in the summer, and that should tell you a lot right there. In fact, they're not wanting anything during the summertime, and that's why it's a great time for fawning and great times for antlers to grow. If antlers are growing in the wintertime, we'd have very stubby little bucks running around. Whitetail world would change forever. So again, first level, just about anyone can afford. Second level, takes some more equipment. And the third level, perennial base, summer greens, and a lot of times I'll just refer to as beans. Beans are the #1 crop failure that I see across the entire country. And I'm not just saying that. If beans were the most powerful food plot that you should be planting, as someone who's paid to design whitetail properties at the highest level in the country every single year, you can bet that I would push beans a lot more than I do. But I still encourage beans on 10, 15, 20% of all lands I go to. And that could change depending on the year where I'm at the most. But beans and perennials are a great way to raise your deer population. A great way. So if you're establishing plots on a new property with low deer numbers like I did in the UP, I used clover for several years. Even used some summer combinations of beans and buckwheat and peas to grow the deer herd, because does that are here today are here to stay. So if I attract a lot of does and fawns to a property in the summertime, they stay into the fall and the winter as long as I have appreciable food sources for them to do so. Beans. If you have high deer numbers, quit planting beans and perennials. The deer do not need the perennials in your area, no matter who's saying that they do. It's a great tool for raising a deer population, and that's why most areas do not need a population raised, and that's why this is the 10 to 15% club. Only 10 to 15% of all food plotters should be planting that base as it relates to your ability to influence a deer herd, your ability to grow a deer herd, your ability to have a great hunt. You really don't want to plant that. This right here, I would say this falls into the range of 30 to 40%, could be even less than 30%, 25%. This area right here, 100% of you should be planting fall greens as that foundation and base for your food plotting program. Very critical. The cool thing is this is the easiest. This right here takes some more equipment, and the cool thing is you don't have to worry about beans. And I say the number one crop failure because usually they're not making it till the fall. And so it's not that people aren't getting them to grow, although that's the case. I see people throwing expensive beans out in the ground and just hoping they grow. You have to work them into the soil, so it takes a little bit more effort. But deer eat them during the summertime, and if you're not looking to grow your herd, then it's a bad idea to plant. And perennials, why would you not plant clover or alfalfa? We killed a whole bunch of it out here. It's because it's not going to build your deer herd. It's not going to allow you to be a herd influencer, because you don't influence any deer herd during June, July, August. You only influence a deer herd during October, November, December. So if you have those perennials, and then on top of that, perennials compared to annual greens. So definitely annual down here. And the reason for that, annual base, is because you have that higher volume. Perennials give you a lower volume. If, let's say you took let's say it was equal. Let's say 4 tons of clover is produced in a clover field per year, and 4 tons of brassica is actually produced in the same field. And it might be less in clover and more in brassica, but let's just say it's even equal. That 4 tons of clover is grown in April, May, June, July, August, and September, 6 months. That 4 tons of brassica is grown in 10 weeks. Really big difference. And if you haven't put a doe factor on your land during the summertime, those annuals go a lot further. And that's why someone that focuses on beans, far too often I see clients and people around the country focusing on the top down. If you're in a neighborhood like that and you focus from the bottom up, you are going to be the herd influencer. You're going to be the one that builds a great hunt, can build a great herd. A lot of people do it in reverse. That's unfortunate, and that's why I'm talking about this today, because I want to see you be the herd influencer this year. I want to see you hit the food that matches your land, matches a deer herd, and there are those conditions where you want to have those perennials up here. And I talk about perennial rotations where you establish clover in the fall based on cool season annuals. You take half of that plot the following year, and you again tear down that clover, leave half of it growing, and then you add cool season annuals with clover as a base, and you can rotate a field like that on an ongoing basis. I wrote about that in Quality Whitetails magazine, the QDMA, back in the mid-2000s, early 2000s, and that's a great viable tactic in those areas where you want to build a deer herd. But if you're not building a deer herd, you start from the top or from the bottom up. If you need to build a deer herd, you can start at the top right here, but you still need to have that green base either way on either land. That green base is appropriate for 100% of all parcels. And what I see on this, I'll leave you with this: mature bucks travel to quality food. Does are homebodies. Those that are here today, again, are here to stay. That means if they're here during the summer, they're gonna be there in the fall. There's a giant whitetail shift to bucks. That I coined that phrase. I've been writing about it for at least 10 to 12 years. The whitetail shift is a real thing. And it's when those mature bucks leave their summer range to seek their fall range. And a lot of times they even seek a different range during the wintertime. Does, on the other hand, they need high cover stem count during the summer for fawning area. If they have adequate food going into the fall and even the winter, and they can stay in the cover that they have been all year, they'll stay. Bucks, on the other hand, they seek quality food, and they don't mind moving a mile to do so. We're trying to keep the bucks that we have on the land during the summer. This property has always been a summer property. We're turning that into a fall winter property. That's why we're adding the corn. That's why we got rid of the alfalfa and clover. That's why we got rid of the soybeans that were diminishing and not being appreciable and not being around in early October. Because again, even though they had 5 or 6 acres planted in beans, it wasn't enough for the deer herd around here, and it was gone in October, especially when they set up that summer door factory to hit those beans all summer long. There's not much there. Bucks leave. So you want the best food you can in November and December. You will be the herd influencer because you'll attract those mature bucks. Mature bucks, again, go a long ways to find that quality food. If you have appreciable greens, you can hold them. If you have corn, you can even do better. And in some cases where you're surrounded by beans and the beans don't really matter during the summer, then you can plant those beans and you'll have some more deer hanging around December when it's really cold. But what I find in December, it's kind of a pivot point. Warm December, they'll hit more corn. Cold December, they'll hit more beans on the same property. So always have corn as your base and getting that in. And that's the food plot pyramid. That's how it's broken down. You know, again, 100% here, maybe a third of all people here, and 10 to 15% on that top range should be planting this. Really go for that green base, and you'll be on track every year. Work from the bottom up, and you'll hit the mark for offering deer the food they need on your parcel. And it's not only the food that they need, because the lowest hole in the bucket is the fall and winter time. That's the time where deer need this stuff the most. They need that diversity. But it's going to give you the opportunity to be the herd influencer and influence your hunt in an incredible way. And I can't wait to hear about it. It's a different way of looking at things, but this is the way that I've been teaching clients for 15 years now, and it works. And that's why I have a huge client base across the country. And after designing whitetail properties and especially food plot programs for a living for 15 years on over 1,000 properties, this makes sense more and more every year that I practice it, every year my clients practice it. And if you practice it, you'll find those same great results as well. Well, if you made it to the end of this video, you're obviously interested in whitetail habitat solutions, what I have to teach, and you will love my new web class series. The first one is how to design your whitetail property. It's out now. The link is in the description. I invite you to check it out. It's on my website. Can't wait to hear about it.